Hello, hello everybody, welcome back. We are back in Gilded Shadows for Lance's sweet ending, and our girl's got a whole new personality now. So she's cautious, stubborn, and emotional. We've just escaped the big Terminator boy, so we're in the sewers, dying. And she's a little more emotional about it now, so we got some new dialogue for it. But I was so tired lying there, my eyelids heavy with sleep. But I couldn't do that. Beneath the weariness bubbled choking rage at the ones who put me in this situation. The people who cared so little for life that they would do this. Not just them, but everyone who thought it was okay to disrupt my life for something as ridiculous as Psy. This wasn't okay! From the grabbing me off the streets to the attacks. It wasn't right. And I needed to get back to make sure they knew they couldn't just do this to people. I forced my eyes open, thankful they had adjusted somewhat to the dark. Interesting. She was quite worked up about that this time around. Tears? Tears. But I bit them back, swallowing down the lump. No. No, I wouldn't give up. I braced my body on the wall, gritting my teeth against the pain as I tried to pull myself to my feet again. And she's fighting a lot more this time. The other time she's like, you know what? I'm just gonna lay here. I was panting by the time I got to my feet. Darkness crept into the corners of my vision. I wouldn't die here. Or at any rate, I would keep fighting until I had no energy left to stand. My eyes watered, though I couldn't tell if it was from pain or frustration anymore. Until I tried to take a step, only for my legs to buckle. I tumbled to the ground, letting out a scream when pain rocketed through my body. My face dipped into the water, eliciting a coughing spasm as I sucked some of it in. I rolled on my back, and this time I didn't move again, too busy trying to catch my breath and keep conscious. Alright, now we're gonna get saved. So, we've made it to our first choice this route, and this time we're going to do something different already. We're gonna stay in bed. The latter part won out. I just didn't have it in me to move. Not with the memory of pain-filled walking through that drainage tunnel still lingering. That was enough to ensure I never wanted to move again. I stayed in place, enjoying the soft bed as much as I could with everything hurting and feeling like it was on fire. As far as my location, someone had clearly found me in that drainage system. I had no idea how that had worked, but I owed them my life. I remembered little about it beyond seeing a person-shaped shadow. You don't remember the beautiful eyes? Then I thought I remembered being in a car and hearing a low voice. I had a vague memory of someone leaning over me. I couldn't quite remember their face, just the tousled silver hair. And silver eyes. There it is. Fade? Well, who knew? I might not even be remembering that right. It was all pretty vague. But I thought it might be a man, if only because their speaking voice was very low. I looked to be in a bedroom. Aside from the oddly rounded walls and plants, it was otherwise a normal room. It had only one shuttered window, leaving the outside a mystery. But the man had come from the waste, so he wasn't one of the people who'd been looking for me. Could I be in a Nomos city or settlement now? It would make sense, given I was in someone's home and not a prison or lab. And I wasn't dead. But then why not a hospital? Surely my injuries warranted that much. So it must not be a major city. Where in the world had I teleported myself to that I'd been spotted by someone? The Nomos never strayed that close to the domes, did they? I rubbed my face. There wasn't much point in wondering about it until I had the chance to speak to whoever lived here. I rolled gently onto my uninjured side, pulling a pillow close. My body ached so much. I wanted the pain to just stop. A yawn escaped as weariness washed over me again. The exhaustion was too great for even the pain to keep it at bay. I dozed off, wondering when I'd get a proper meeting with my savior and find out where I had ended up. I hoped it was a neutral party, and not someone playing nice because they also wanted to take advantage of a newly awakened queen rank. And I hoped they could tell me how to get back. I drifted off again, and this time I dreamed of a sweeping wasteland forever caught in between light and shadow. Interesting. So we didn't meet our boy yet this time. So, my host Or hosts. From the drive here, I only remembered one person. And I thought I remembered someone singing in a low voice. I couldn't remember what sort of person they were, or if there was more than one. So this is still different, okay. Even now, their voice filtered in from the other room, low and soft as they sang. I didn't hear anyone else. So, someone who loved plants and occasionally picked up strange women from the waste to nurse back to health in their own home. And was a good cook. Because something smelled amazing. My stomach growled loud enough I'd have been embarrassed had there been anyone else around. If I had been here a while, I couldn't imagine how I'd been eating. If they were just forcing a few bites into me whenever I regained a semblance of consciousness, it was understandable that I'd be hungry. I decided to risk getting up. Alright. No, not yet. All different. After a moment's hesitation, I moved my legs over the side of the bed and carefully got to my feet. My legs were shaky and weak, like that feeling you got after you've been sick for a long time. Still different. And the pain. A dull ache that went from my knee up into my hip. And if I moved just right, the base of my spine joined the party too. I hissed softly as I attempted an uncertain step. Then I made my way across the room, leaning on the door frame to catch my breath when I reached it. It hadn't been a long walk, but I already felt like I would need to sit soon. I was much weaker than I realized, which made me worry even more about how long I'd been here. From where I stood, I studied the other room while gripping the door frame with my uninjured hand. Still different, still different. It was a living space, bright and almost as filled with plants as the bedroom. It almost brought a smile to my face. Anyone who loved living things this much couldn't be that bad. But of course, the person in question drew most of my attention. In the kitchen at the far side of the main living space stood a man with silver curls that faded to black at the ends falling into his eyes. He sang to himself and looked immersed in his cooking. At a glance, he didn't seem that old. Maybe a few years older than me. The face was somewhat familiar. I thought I recalled him hovering over me a few times. I watched him for several minutes before he looked up and noticed me. His eyes, an impossible shade of pale silver that immediately made me think of Fade and wonder if he was an Esper, went wide when he saw me.
"Oh, you're up!"
He dropped what he was doing and hurried towards me. Panic fluttered through my stomach, but his expression was concerned, and I couldn't imagine he intended to hurt me.
"Let me help you to the chair. I'm sure you're still feeling quite weak, aren't you? I don't know if you should even be up. You should have just called."
I wanted to get up. I'm a little hungry.
"I would have brought the food to you. I'd hoped you'd wake up enough to eat properly today."
He helped me to a soft round chair nearby, then moved the tall plant next to it further away to give me more space. Didn't poke her this time. Who are you?
"My name is Lance Basileus. I'm the one who found you. You're at my house."
Lance. My name is Morgan.
"I'm happy we can introduce ourselves at last. And if you're not feeling up to eating here, I can help you back to bed, then bring your breakfast to you."
Breakfast? So, it's morning? No, I'd rather eat out here. I have a lot of questions, as you can imagine. Like, where is this? Do you live here alone?
"This is a small homestead in the Twilight Wastes, and yes, I live here alone. Why don't you ask the rest of your questions while we eat? I'll tell you anything you want to know, but I'd rather get some food in you sooner than later. And it's almost ready."
That sounds good.
"Alright, I'll finish up real fast."
He paused a moment, crouching down to give me a serious look, before he nodded, almost to himself, and stood again, hurrying back to the kitchen. My eyes tracked to the nearby window, awash with the pink hues of perpetual twilight. Or dawn, I supposed, depending how you looked at it. The landscape was alien, beautiful, and different from what I remembered seeing outside that drainage system. How far from there are we? I had so many things to ask, and so many things I wasn't sure I wanted to reveal. I was going to have to consider how to approach this. Alright, now. But I was a straggler because I had been running away from an attempt on my life. I wondered what made him a straggler and where he came from. The domes, like me? That was the only other option if he wasn't Nomos. Okay. Ooh. Is this for the walk? Yes. Okay, to go and take a look. We are declining this time, sadly. But there would be time for that later, I was sure. For now, I didn't want to overdo it. Maybe not today. I am a little tired. Curious as I was, there shouldn't be a problem putting a tour off for a day. It wasn't like I had a plan to hike back to the nearest dome right away. Whether or not it was a small property, I'd barely made it to a chair before needing to sit. I wasn't sure how I would walk around outside. Besides, I feel a little underdressed. Even if it's just the two of us. Not that I'm complaining. I mean, this is comfortable, and I appreciate you letting me borrow it. Besides, one gust of wind outside and Lance would see everything! Amazing. Then again, given he'd changed my clothes before, I suppose he already had. That didn't mean he wanted a free show courtesy of nature, though.
I'm sorry I couldn't find something else for you. Unfortunately, I didn't have anything else that would fit. I washed your clothes, but they had stains I couldn't get out, and they were a little ripped. I attempted to mend them, but there are places beyond repair. But I'll find a solution to the lack of clothing. Please don't worry about it. I have your undergarments. I didn't put them back because, well...
I laughed a little as his voice trailed off awkwardly. It's alright. You don't have to worry about it either. I'm not uncomfortable in this.
I suppose the lack of shoes would be a problem outside anyway. You didn't have any when I found you, and I don't recommend going without them here. Inside is fine, of course, but the wind kicks up a lot of debris, so even if the ground looks safe, there can be sharp pieces in the sand.
Yeah. I lost my shoes. I still didn't know how that happened, and despite how incredibly weird that sounded, Lance just nodded his head as if it was reasonable.
Well, we have options for finding new things for you to wear. But I suppose we should allow you time to recover first before we worry too much about your wardrobe.
He just segued into something else, asking no details about my situation, despite how incredibly weird it must seem to him. And again, it struck me as odd. Wasn't it natural to want to know more about the person you'd invited into your home under strange circumstances? Was he really just respecting my privacy? I didn't want to suspect the man who saved me, but somehow I got the feeling both of us had a lot we weren't saying. Secrets were normal, but also somehow uncomfortable.
Do you want me to help you back to the bedroom? Or would you prefer to stay out here for a while? You've been lying down a lot the last few days. I thought your back might hurt. It would be normal for your back to hurt after a while, right?
I'll stay up for a little while, if you don't mind. Lance nodded and stood, reaching for the dishes placed around the countertop. I stood as well, reaching for my plate, but swayed under a wave of sudden dizziness.
Whoa! Careful!
His arms went around me, supporting me as I slumped against the bar. Nice reflexes.
I'll clean up. Please remember you're still recovering, Morgan. And you're a guest.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to cause trouble for you.
You're no trouble at all.
To my surprise, his arm swept under me and he lifted me against his chest before I could protest. He carried me to the sofa in a few quick strides and set me down, smiling at me as he sat on the low coffee table nearby. Cute. Secrets or not, the only things I saw in his face were kindness and concern. He was either a genuinely caring person or the world's most amazing actor.
You stay here while I finish cleaning up. Would you like another cup of tea?
Yes, that would be lovely. I watched him return to the kitchen, having once again obliterated any lurking concerns or suspicions. There might be a lot we still didn't know about each other, but there was nothing wrong with him respecting my secrets. I was just being paranoid because of what I'd gone through. Lance was a good person. I could just tell. Somehow, I had gone from having the absolute worst luck in the world to what seemed like the best possible outcome for the circumstances. I leaned against the back of the sofa, pulling my legs up before deciding that position hurt too much. My side had begun to ache now, like maybe I'd broken a rib or something, and I wondered if I had been feeling so much better earlier because of some sort of painkiller he'd given me. My body was reminding me I had injuries to worry about. I found myself toying with the leaf of a nearby plant as I watched him. I couldn't help but notice you take care of a lot of different plants here. You must quite like them.
I do. Well, I have a greenhouse too, but sometimes they just make their way inside. I think they help liven the place up. It would feel empty without them.
They're beautiful, and look really well cared for.
Thank you. Most really do just grow on their own if you give them a little care. All you have to do is watch over them well. Though some can't help but be problem children. And there are those that are fussy about you getting too involved in their care. Bradley, for instance, is always picky about his water intake.
Bradley? You named them.
Every single one.
I laughed as I looked around. That was a lot of plants to name. Lance began running through them all, pointing to each plant as he told me its name. There were Jill and Margaret and Jonathan and David and on and on. As he cleaned, he rambled on about the plants and which ones were native species adapted to the unique light availability in Arcalis, and which ones were native from Earth. Most of what he said I already knew, since Dad's line of work involved this sort of thing as well, but it was nice to listen to Lance talk while he cleaned. He had a soothing voice. I draped my arm over the back of the sofa, leaning my head on it as I listened. I couldn't help but wonder if he ever got lonely here by himself. He had said we were far from the nearest city, and he'd mentioned a town as well, but his wording made it seem like this property was pretty isolated. He did say the Nomos came for trading sometimes. I wondered how often sometimes was. After he finished cleaning, Lance prepared another pot of tea and joined me on the sofa.
I haven't done the watering today, so I need to go out and check the greenhouse. Will you be okay here? Should I help you back to bed?
I'll be fine here. Don't worry about me. He really was an attentive caretaker. I suppose it made sense. I couldn't imagine how much tending all these plants needed on a daily basis.
All right. I won't be long. Please don't move around on your own if you don't think you can.
He looked like he wanted to say something else, but stood without another word. I promise I'll be fine.
Then I'll return in a little while.
When he left from the front door, a blast of air laced with the dusty smell of outside spun its way inside. For a moment, I regretted not taking a look around with him. I didn't have a clear memory of what happened right at the end in that drainage area. So more than remembering the astonishment of seeing the waste, I just remembered the hopelessness and the frustration of the moment. It was beautiful. The rocky hills here were narrow and flat on top, and trees and other foliage somehow had clawed their way up from the ground, more than I would have expected. I was curious exactly where in the waste we were, how close to the sea or the edge. My understanding was that the foliage grew denser the closer to the sea you traveled, so I imagined I couldn't be at the edge where it would have been more sandy and brighter, nor was I right on top of the sea either. Probably somewhere in the wide expanse between the two. It was still desolate. Fascinating, but empty and vast. That wasn't a bad thing, though. For the time being, my being lost in that vastness wasn't loneliness, but safety. If I could stay lost for a while, that would be for the best. I shut my eyes again, the sound of the wind whipping around the habitat the only thing I could hear. The headache had worsened again. I finally laid down and curled myself around a pillow. I could walk to the bedroom, but I didn't want Lance to worry when he got back, so I would just wait. Even if I dozed off a little, it would be fine. Right? So I let the sleepiness take over and nodded off there on the sofa. I didn't know when Lance came back, but the next time I opened my eyes, I was back in bed snuggled into the blankets, and I quickly fell asleep again. Tomorrow I would talk to him more, and tell him where I came from, and maybe how I ended up here, and ask him what I should do next and where I should go. Tomorrow. Nice. Alright. Things have been quite different so far. It's been interesting. And cute. Some cute moments still. The following day was a little better until I pushed myself too hard. I was determined to get better, to be able to move around normally. When I ended up on the floor with everything spinning and my leg feeling like I'd wrenched it due to how I fell, I learned it might be best to take it slow and work out my limits first. I'd never been a very compliant patient when ill, but I'd also never been hurt this bad before. It was a lesson I took to heart, if only because I spent the next 2 hours in complete agony. Today was much, much better, though, so far. So I was recovering. I wasn't bedridden anymore, and I wasn't damaged beyond repair. Alright, recovery is going. My first time outside had been the day before, and it had been an experience, to say the least. Everything was so foreign, the wind, the smells, and of course the vista. I was struck again by the size of everything, and myself relative to the mountains or the sky. So small. That was accompanied by a sense of gentle solitude, like Lance's house was the only thing that existed in the world. It wasn't something I'd ever experienced in the city. Of course, the solace was huge, but it didn't feel endless the way this place did. And there were people everywhere, making it seem even smaller. Always busy, always noisy. This place wasn't like that at all. It was wonderful, and, in a strange way, terrifying. I shook off the odd feeling and went to find Lance in the greenhouse. Alright. Oh yeah. Okay, so he's glad we're doing better.
After yesterday...
There won't be a repeat of that. I promise I walked very slow on my way here. He frowned hard at that.
The climate in the greenhouse probably isn't good for you. We should go back to the house. Humans never know what's best for them.
Okay, so we can only be affectionate or cautious. We're gonna be cautious this time. I chewed the inside of my cheek for a moment, finally deciding to just spit it out. Lance, I don't want to interrupt you while you're working, but I was hoping we could talk a little. About me, my situation and everything. You've been very kind not to ask about it until now, but...
You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to.
No, I think I need to.
Of course. I understand. Maybe we should go back inside where it's more comfortable then.
We can talk here if you want. I don't mind letting you finish what you're doing.
Are you sure? I don't want you to tire yourself out.
I'll be fine if it's just for a little while. You've already done so much for me. The least I can do is let you water your plants without interruption.
The plants will survive a slight delay. I'm more worried about you. You're still recovering. I don't want you to push yourself.
I won't. But I imagine it's good to get up and move around a little anyway. He stood still, watching me for a moment as if gauging whether I was going to fall over from fatigue right then and there.
I get the feeling this may be a long conversation as well.
I couldn't deny that. There was a lot to explain, and a lot to ask. I suppose it will be. Lance let out a soft chuckle.
Let's go back inside for now, then. I'm sure it will be more comfortable.
I felt a little bad for interrupting, but was glad to be finally having a proper talk with him. On my way back to the front of the greenhouse, I stopped and looked back at him. Can I ask you one thing first, Lance?
Of course you can. What is it?
Well, I've wondered why you've asked nothing about me until now. You must have been curious.
I found you badly injured in an unusual place. I knew there was a story to how you came to be there, but after all you'd been through, I didn't wish to pressure you for details. Not when your focus should be on recovery. I thought you would talk to me about it when you were ready, and I was sure it was better to wait and let you decide when that was.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
I'm just relieved you're feeling well enough to discuss it now.
Me too. Alright. So then we chitty-chatted. Did you just say you rerouted my nanosystem functions? How is that possible? No, that shouldn't be possible for a normal person. Lance sighed and sat down, a regretful smile playing on his lips.
Allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Lance Basileus, yes. But once I was called King, and others knew me as what you called the planetary AI.
What? Huh? What does that mean? I'm not sure I can believe that story. I hope you can understand. Girl, after the story you have? You not believing that is crazy.
I can understand better than anyone, I think.
Are you saying you're human, but you have the memories and abilities of the planetary AI? And a king rank Esper?
Yes. A set of truly strange events aligned to result in my existence. I don't know how to prove it to you, though. I've never had to prove who I am before. Everyone always just knew, whether I was Deimos or whether I was king. It's strange to think how I must look in your eyes. Strange and fascinating.
If you want me to believe you, you're going to have to find a way to prove it. I can't just accept this.
Then how do you think I should?
I guess do or say something you'd only be able to if you are who you claim to be. The day before I was attacked, I took an exam. Given how much time has passed, the results might be in. If you can access everything on the planet, you can tell me if I passed. But how would you know he was telling the truth? Because you don't even know your results.
Oh, that's easy.
He tipped his head to the side, eyes going far away and moving side to side, slightly as if reading.
The test results are compiled, but haven't been released yet. Morgan Leone. You scored in the top 5%. You are among those entered into the prime tier for your next level of education.
I was in the top 5%?
For interplanetary archaeology, going into the 3rd level.
That's correct. Right. Okay. He shouldn't have had any way of knowing any of the things like my course or year. At the very least, that supported the claim he was a king rank, didn't it? Otherwise, how else would he know that information? And she got her results so early this time. Is this... Okay, we're back. I thought Afra looked familiar. What are we doing? We're doing cautious this time instead of flexible. Okay. How much do these reverse nets lower the odds of me being found out here?
Psi isn't an ability structure that we can always graph and quantify, as much as we might try. It just takes the right person and the right moment to break through any barrier. I've lived here for 10 years without being found, but there's no denying there is a chance that, what is the saying? The stars will align. That said, you shouldn't worry about your safety here, Morgan. If they locate you, I'll know long before they can get to you. I'm monitoring everyone's movements even now.
Ooh. Aw, no affectionate. Interesting, we would have had an option for an affectionate choice if we went this route. Cool. But I guess I'll have to take your word. I guess I'll have to take your word for that. You know more about it than I do anyway. It wasn't as if I could do any monitoring of any kind. I wasn't sure I liked it, though. He was just one person. He couldn't watch everything at once. Then again, I was forgetting he was also the planetary AI. Ugh, I still couldn't quite get my head around that.
You don't have to make such a worried face, Morgan. As I said, the chances of them finding you here are low.
But not non-existent.
There are very few impossibilities in the universe.
Well, that was true. Would have been nice to have a slightly firmer reassurance, though. But it seemed like that was as good as it was going to get. Then I guess I'll stay here. For now. Lance looked relieved.
I'm glad. I think this is also the way to avoid the most fighting. Right now, everyone is just looking for you on their own, but if you go back, there may be more confrontations. Avoiding violence is...
That's right. The AI had always been a pacifist, right? Avoiding violence would be important to him, though I didn't know what sort of person Deimos originally was. Are we... Nope, not yet. I was struck by how strange it must be if he had conflicting personality traits from each of his different... past lives? Was that the right way to think of it? I wasn't sure what else to call them. But it wasn't like normal people weren't full of contradictions, too. That was human nature.
Then that's settled. I'm... glad. I didn't realize how anxious I was waiting for you to decide to talk to me, but I didn't want to rush you either.
Are we... Okay, yeah. Send your mother a message rather than calling her. Okay. There was a little bit of avoidance there on my part. Talking to her face to face would be difficult for so many reasons. I doubted I could hold it together while telling her about being attacked. And if I lost my composure, she'd worry even more. I also would have to face Mum and Dad and acknowledge I had been lying for a very long time about being an Esper. Though I hadn't been aware about being a Queen rank, I did know I possessed high enough Psi level to be considered an Esper. And I'd kept it a secret. Because of that, the entire family had been uprooted. I would have to deal with that eventually, but not yet. The story we'd settled on was a distortion of the truth, but not a lie. That seemed like it would be more convincing. How is this part? I know you have a lot of questions for me, but please believe I'm safe. Currently, I'm staying with the Nomos. I know Dad will be excited to hear about that. They've treated me for some mild injuries and have given me shelter. How I got here is kind of a long story, though. I'm sorry for not telling you about my Psi ability. I had no idea it was strong enough to be noticed by others, or to set a chain of events like this in place. I wish I could give you more information about where I am and when I'll be home, but for now I have to stay here. Please keep this message secret and respond to me the way I described earlier. It's the only way to keep my current location hidden.
Do you believe they'll accept such a vague explanation?
I imagine so. I usually tell Mum everything, so I hope she realizes my being secretive means this is important. But that's why I also want to send some images to her. Things that aren't identifiable location-wise, but will let them see I'm physically safe. I hope that will help as well. I'm still a little worried about this all being somehow tracked or traced.
I was an adept Esper even before merging with the AI. There's no way anyone will hack the secure network I created. As long as the information stays there, it'll be safe.
Are we... Yeah, we're back. Okay. We be skipping. Whoa. What are we doing with this? Are we doing the bro zone? No bro zone today. Okay. Well, you did already see everything when you changed my clothes while I was unconscious, didn't you?
I suppose that's true. It didn't occur to me to look away, and it would have been impossible to treat your injuries without looking. Even with the revised nanite function, I had to clean the external injuries and bathe you. Upon consideration, it seems a little invasive since you didn't consent.
No more invasive than the doctor or nurse treating a patient. When you're dealing with injuries, there's not much you can do about that kind of thing. Even today, you were catching me so I didn't fall. It wasn't anyone's fault the towel slipped. I guess it's embarrassing, but I can't get angry about that kind of thing. Seems like too much wasted effort.
I'm glad. But even so, I apologize. I should have left the clothes in the hallway for you. Sometimes I forget things that are considered basic courtesy or politeness.
Well, you live alone, so there's not much need for it.
It's not just that. As king, I didn't have to consider those things. As Deimos, I did. But sometimes the memories on both sides are a little foggy. It takes time to remember, though...
A faint smile came to his lips as he tipped his head to the side.
With you here, it's as if I'm remembering many things I've forgotten over the years. It's enjoyable. I feel bad that I'm probably enjoying your stay here much more than you are.
I'm not sure about that. It's not like this isn't a fascinating experience for me as well.
But you never wanted to come here.
That's true, but it doesn't change the fact that I am here. If I just focus on the fact I didn't want to be here, I know I'll miss out on experiencing something I never would have been able to experience before. And I'd be terrible company for the person who saved my life. We can't have that.
You're such a fascinating person, Morgan. Truly.
I should be saying that to you.
I guess we're both fascinating to each other, then. But I suppose things outside our experiences always are.
Alright, and segue. I wouldn't be here to help you. Okay, so he wouldn't want to go back and change things where he wasn't here to help us. Neither would I. Though, I suppose I might be biased.
I think this is a situation where it's fine to be biased.
But it did make me wonder. What events did he set into motion by deciding to intervene for me? Given his reluctance to intervene at all, I should probably just be grateful he did. Okay. What are we doing? Ah, about his family. Okay. Are we being analytical or cautious? Cautious. Okay, last time we were like, no, your family needs to know you're alive, bro. But this time we're agreeing. Maybe you're right. I didn't like to admit that, but I'd had similar thoughts about my family's reaction to me being an Esper. It wasn't the same as Lance's situation at all. Lance had truly gone through a metamorphosis I couldn't begin to understand, and I had no idea what Deimos had been like before. So I felt I could understand the sentiment at least a little. I still had wondered if my family would see me as something strange or treat me like an outsider. If I had those kinds of thoughts when all I was dealing with was being an Esper, I could only imagine what it was like when he was dealing with something so much more significant. And he'd had 10 years to think about it. What advice could I offer on that subject when I didn't know his family? Though it did sound like he was close with his brother, so I couldn't imagine his brother rejecting him. I wasn't sure about his father, though, but Lance spoke about him affectionately. It was a situation that was far too heavy for me. It was unfortunate he isolated himself and let them believe he was dead. That was just too sad. I was so grateful I'd been able to talk to my mother and explain the situation. Alright. And we're back again. Oh no, the storm. Suddenly my throat was dry and words were difficult to form. I'd read about these sand flares before, but experiencing one firsthand was very, very different. It was loud. It was terrifying and dark outside, but for those painfully bright flashes. Alright. Lance closed the window shutters, blocking out the flashing lightning, though there was nothing he could do about the thunder. I was still rooted to the same spot, flinching every time another powerful boom of thunder sounded. Lance returned to my side, and, just as if I was a small child, he wrapped his arms around me and drew my head to his chest. Aww.
I'm sure this is very different from the peacefulness inside the domes.
I just nodded against him as he smoothed his hands down my back. He hummed softly in the back of his throat, and I could feel the gentle vibration of it against my cheek. Oh, that would be so soothing. It was ridiculous to be afraid of something like this. But in fairness, I wasn't afraid of the sound of thunder. It was just intense. And I was more afraid that the lightning and wind would damage the house. I could imagine the roof peeling back and some kind of huge debris smacking into me or something. I suppose the mental image of me being sucked up into the sky and whirled away into oblivion was ridiculous, but it was also there. Lance, of course, was ever the patient and calm presence. That I needed this level of comfort was ridiculous. But I didn't move away from him, and he didn't move away from me. Not for a long time.
Sand flares are especially frightening the first time around, but you get used to them.
I get the impression you didn't need a warm hug the first time you experienced one. I was trying to make light of the situation, but it fell flat. He squeezed me a little tighter.
At that time, there was no one around to hug me even if I needed it.
That made me pull away and look up at him with a mixture of sadness and curiosity. Were you here when that happened? He shook his head.
Not yet. I was alone. In a different place.
How did you end up here anyway? Curiosity quelled the fear somewhat, but it occurred to me almost immediately he might not want to talk about it. Unless it's something you don't want to discuss. He let out a quiet laugh and guided me to the sofa.
It's already been nearly 10 years. Now it's nothing but an old memory. Do you want to hear the full story? It might be a nice distraction from the storm.
We sat together, arranged on the sofa very close together. When another crack of thunder rippled through the building and I flinched, Lance put an arm around me and pulled me just a little closer. Alright, story time. Are we affectionate or cautious? Cautious. Only hand-holding this time. No hugs, even after he's like, nobody hugged me back then. I didn't even know what to say to all that. It wasn't the sort of story I expected. Not from the gentle way he spoke and told it. He'd given me some details about his past, but nothing as like what I just heard. It was so terrible, but he told it like it was a distant memory, or just a fairy tale he was relaying to a child. Yet I couldn't imagine it was really that easy to talk about. That pain, the loneliness and fear. Having to endure it alone even until now. My heart twinged at that. I took his hands, cradling them in my own. You didn't have to tell me that story, Lance. Not as a distraction. I'm so sorry you went through all that. He seemed surprised by my words, staring down at our joined hands as if shocked I'd reach out, though it wasn't even the first time.
But it's an old story. It isn't as if it hurts anymore.
I doubt that's true. Time doesn't erase scars. It just makes them fade. I don't know how you even endured.
It was all I could do.
I apologize I made you dredge that up.
You didn't! I'm sorry. I didn't think it would be that sad a story.
How could he think I wouldn't find that sad? Wandering the wastes alone until his arms and legs were ruined, then merging with the AI and losing himself, both selves, and huddling alone in an ancient complex alone while storms raged overhead. All of it sounded so devastatingly lonely. And it wasn't as if telling him I was sorry would erase it either. You should have hugged him, girl. Should have hugged him. I don't think Lance knew what to make of my reaction. We sat there in silence for a time and listened to the storm raging outside, and somehow it wasn't as overwhelming anymore. I wasn't sure how long it was before he finally relaxed against the back of the sofa and broke the silence again, telling me about acquiring his first plants, and how he started naming them after the Nomos he knew because he felt bad not naming them. He told me how he developed a love of naming everything. The false ivy named Steve, the cactus named Jill. Told me all these stories. Okay, they're doing psi training, gotcha.
Perhaps, but if anything is true about you, it's that you're very stubborn about this sort of thing when you wish to be. Now, the easiest way is to close your eyes and try to not focus on the sounds around you or anything else.
Okay. Doing it. Do you think your life would have been better if you had been normal? It almost didn't seem like a fair question, since he wouldn't be, well, Lance if he was normal, but I couldn't help but wonder if he had regrets. Lance contemplated it seriously for a moment.
I assume my life would have been different were I not an Esper. That's all I can say. Humans always have a tendency to want to separate things into convenient binaries. Good and bad, right and wrong, better or worse. But I don't believe it's always that simple. In my experience, life is filled with nuance and possibility, more than we can ever be aware of. And yet we can only realize a single path as we go through it. Whether it's better or worse than other paths isn't a metric we can know. But I observe there is a tendency to believe that surely another possibility would have been better.
The grass is always greener.
Grass is... Oh! An idiom. Yes.
Alright. So I can lift a spice container with telekinesis. I doubt I can use that for self-defense, so what else?
I suppose it depends on the spice. But what other skills do you wish to learn?
I'm not sure. I've done teleportation before, though it was more a panic response. Okay, we're back again. Okay, he wanted to suggest hiding, blocking, and running away. I didn't like that. It wasn't that I wanted to fight people, throw cybursts everywhere, or hurt anyone, but based on what I'd seen, it would not be enough to run away. What if they continued to come after me? If I wanted to at least try to live my life without going to Endgame, then until I could find a place I could do that, I needed to be able to show people I wasn't someone that was easy to contend with. It was strange picturing myself doing that sort of thing, but even with my limited experience, I could tell what sort of world Espers lived in, and it wasn't one where you could just run away. I cast a sidelong look at Lance as he sipped his tea. Then again, I suppose he felt that way because that's what he'd done, and it had worked so far. Maybe my experience had turned me into a pessimist. The major difference between us was that I couldn't stay out here forever. I thought about my answer for a long time before I spoke again. I guess learning strategies to shield myself or get away from fights is a good first step. I'm not sure it's the only step I can afford to take. With the self-defense classes I took before, it's true much of the focus was about getting away from an attacker, and it was very reactive. But that doesn't mean it didn't involve attack strategies. I don't want to hurt another person, and I might struggle to do it when faced with the proposition, but if you recall, I had more than people to deal with. If I encountered one of those retrieval units again, it would be nice to disable it instead of just run away in a panic.
That's true as well. I suppose that I simply don't want to imagine you having to fight anyone. But your points are also valid.
Either way, I need a starting point. It might be best to try something like a reverse cage first, then a shield? Teleportation seems a little more complicated, but I should probably figure that technique out too. Alright, do some research, do some stuff. Oh, we're doing the I'm gonna miss it here. No! I'm going to miss it here when I go back. Everything is so peaceful. I have a feeling it won't be long until I crave that peace.
Based on our earlier conversation, I had a feeling you must be thinking about going back already.
I can't stay forever. As much as there might be a part of me that wants to.
Have you decided when?
No, I haven't. I want a better handle on my Sci first. No matter where I decide to go, I reckon it's best to do at least that much.
I suppose that might be correct.
How long will they look for me?
I can't say for sure. Your death was never confirmed, and no faction has indicated they've obtained a new queen, so I believe several groups remain convinced you're still on the run.
Is there a safe place for Espers anywhere in the domes? Somewhere they can just be, without being soldiers or being hunted?
In the domes. There are places that are trying to be that and places where Espers find it easier to hide. But a true sanctuary, not that I'm aware of.
And outside them?
Maybe Syrah, Dione, your original target location. The Nomos cities perhaps, though it's difficult to say for sure. They don't have a lot of experience with Esper refugees.
I had considered all those locations. Going to any of those places now meant self-imposed exile. Like Lance. I didn't know if I was ready to hide myself away forever, and the alternative led back to a single point. This topic was always a circle with no answer. There was no perfect place for me anymore, and I couldn't seem to settle on a brand of imperfection.
Morgan, we don't have to talk about this right now. You still have time. Especially if you want to get a handle on your Sci first. You're the sort of person who likes having a plan, but sometimes you have to take every day as it comes. The future will arrive when it arrives, and you will be here waiting for it, whatever it brings with it.
If I end up asking you to contact Endgame, how fast will they be here?
Hours at most. Probably less.
I nodded. That made sense with teleporters like Ari. Based on what you know, what would they do with me?
You will be inducted into their forces and trained like other Espers. As a queen rank, you'll be put in one of their highest positions. A field agent, undoubtedly.
That was unsurprising, but it was better than prison or death. He took my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze, the look on his face sorrowful behind the soft smile.
Whenever you are ready, just tell me.
I will. Thank you. We had started walking again, wandering through the massive sandstone columns. The weight of my leaving soon was heavy between us, but neither of us said anything more about it. I decided to let the subject drop and lose myself in nature for a while. It wasn't like everything else wouldn't still be there to think about later.